If you know me a little, which some of you do, I'm about experiences. I love to go places. I've been around. I was a pastor's kid growing up, and so I have lived in Colorado and Oklahoma and Kansas. That experience was pretty flat. But Oregon has been a wonderful experience. I've been to Washington and around. This season is a season of experiences with traditions and times that we do not forget. This Advent season, from the coming to church during this time to the anticipating of the coming Christ, to seeking the one that has come. This past year, you have had many experiences. Some have had the greatest experiences of your life. Others, you might want to just kind of completely forget this year. The latter has been the case for my wife and I. It has been one of the hardest years of our lives. So since we're family, we came from a really hard situation, a church that really hurt us. As we moved back to Lebanon, the place where we still had a house, the place that we knew that we could land, in the first couple of weeks, your pastor, Pastor Dale, contacted me and quickly asked me if I would come and preach. I know, that's a goofy picture, and trust me, he'll get me back someday. He asked me to preach. But not only did he ask me to preach, he asked me to lunch and to sit down and talk. And as we sat down and talked, he asked if we were all right and if we had a safe place to land. Sure enough, we did have that safe place to land. And as we talked, he said, I've been in a situation kind of like yours, but I didn't have that safe place to land. And he was rather intent of making sure that we were okay. Preaching, for me, was just that extension of being able to come and be a part of the ministry, to be a part of your lives, to keep going with who God had called me to be, even in this time where, as I've preached here before, of waiting, of being quiet, of listening, and letting God be the one on the stool, the one making the choices. Throughout this year, in just the right times, your pastor has willingly called me to come and pitch hit, as he says every time. I know that you love your pastor, and Pastor Dale loves you. And he also loves those who are hurting, and those who need the strength just to be called upon as God has called them. As I was listening to God and wanting to say, or knowing what to say this week, I came across this quote from Hannah Whittlesmith. It says, "Never indulge at the close of an action in any self-reflective acts of any kind, whether of self-congratulation or of self-despair. Forget the things that are behind the moment they are past, leaving them with God." We are tempted to reflect on the things for either our own glory or for the understanding of what went wrong. If we are seeking God's will and way, then the reflection that comes is only to honor God for what he has done with the broken pieces that only we can bring. They become beautiful, not because of what we do, but because of what God does through us. This season, it's anticipation. It's this excitement that comes. And it's not only an anticipation for now, but for what is to come. And that is what I so love about the Advent season. It's not just about December. It's not just about this one little time. This Advent season is the advent of this King that is coming, who has come and will come again. We live kind of in this Advent. For some, the journey was quick for the Advent season, for the story that was going on. Others, it took a while to get there, like the Magi. Some of us think, the Magi, they were there, right? They were there right at that moment, right when Jesus was born. I'm not too sure about that. I think it took them a little bit longer. I mean, it says a little bit that they stopped and talked to Herod on their way, right? So in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, it says this: After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I may too go and worship him." I'm not sure his heart was right, but we'll get to that. After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On the coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened the treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. These Magi who came wanted to see this new king, the king that was being announced by the stars, the King of the Jews, the one who they thought would rule over all since the stars were announcing him. Could this be that the three could have their minds changed by Christ the King as a baby and an angel who came to them to warn them? I mean, they really wanted to come and worship this king, right? They, maybe even because of selfish desires. Maybe they wanted to be in the good graces of this king. Maybe their selfish desires were the reflections of the congratulations of finding him, or finding the way for a place of self-despair to change how their life would be or how it had been, and maybe to what their future could be. I mean, they were in most likelihood going to go back to Herod and tell him everything. What if, just like their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, their brokenness that they had brought was made beautiful not because of who they were or what they brought, but because God was blessing the honor that they were giving? There are major key players in the story. We see throughout the Advent season that there is faithfulness of all of those who were involved: Mary, Joseph, shepherds, and even the Magi. Their faith was in action. I've been studying in Hebrews chapter 11, and it's an amazing thing to sit and to be a part of a class that's going through Hebrews chapter 11. And we talked about the different people in this section in Hebrews, the faith in action chapter. We talked about Abel and how he brought a better offering than Cain did. We talked about Enoch and that he was taken from this life, but the reason really why he was found faithful was because he walked with God. By faith, Noah, when warned, built a boat. And in that, it was because of the fear of the Lord that he was found faithful. We get to think people like Joseph, who, when his end was near, spoke of the Exodus and giving of instructions for where he would be buried. We get to other people like Moses. When he grew up, he refused to be known as the son of a Pharaoh's daughter. We also have people in there like Rahab, who hid spies. Sometimes we see faith in action, or that statement of faith in action, and we say that we have to be doing something. Actual action. But this list that we've been studying, and I've been studying, has just kind of proven to me that, is hiding someone really an action? Is speaking of an exodus an actual action? I guess it could be. It's speaking, it's hiding. But I think what the concept of this faith in action is the action that's in the heart. And the action of the heart. Because the heart that they had was seeking God. And so this action not only has to be something that is me walking down and talking to you, or me going to a certain place and actually doing things. There are people in this list who did things. But there are people in this list who were seeking God in their heart. And so the action that they had wasn't actually just a physical action. It was something more. So we have all of these people in chapter 11 of Hebrews. And this is where we connect in. We know that there is a long list of those who are called as a great cloud of witnesses. Right? Because of their faithfulness. But yet none of them received what had been promised. In verses 39 and 40, it says this: they were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us they would be made perfect. Even in the worst year of your life, you can be transformed into something that you never thought, could dream of, or even imagine. By December of this year, the beginning of December of this year, my wife and I were pretty low. We were not making ends meet financially. We were struggling to be healthy, and our hope seemed to be pretty much lost. We seem to be reflecting, though, on our past, wanting answers and reflecting on what was the problem, or how could we be in such a position. God moves in mysterious ways. I got a call from a gentleman from all of the places of Fargo, North Dakota. The only connection I have to that is that my mom and dad live in South Dakota. And in this phone conversation, as I was talking to this man named Dan, he says, "Kyle, I have known you since you were 5. That's a weird conversation right there. Because A, I don't remember him because I was 5. And B, he's randomly calling me from North Dakota, and I'm here, and I have no clue what's going on. By the end of the conversation, he said to me, "I'm not sure why, but God told me to start praying for you and your family last month." and I'm not going to stop. That was unexpected. Through the process of walking through some surveys and talking about where God was leading Valerie and I, he asked if he could pray over us. And when he did, he prayed scripture over us. And it was Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And it says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." He started not that way. He started and said, "Therefore I urge you, Valerie and Kyle, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Imagine being in a place where you cannot change anything. You cannot see even the light, maybe at the end of the tunnel. Remember, God is here. He is there. He is with you. And he loves you. And that he's never going to give up on you. No matter how bleak it looks. How much lack of hope that you think that you have. He loves you. And it starts to change. My wife and I's concept after that day, we stopped worrying about what had happened in the past. We stopped saying, why? Why, God, why? And started saying, okay, God, we can't change it. We're going to go from here. And whatever that meant, because it was all up from there. He works in phone calls from people you haven't seen since you were 5. There's hope in this Advent season, this coming, this being apart. Things have changed for me and my wife. We have hope. We have reason to know that God loves us and cares for us, no matter what we've been through in the past or what we're going to be going through in the future. I guess our hope would be that God would find us faithful, just like the list here in Hebrews chapter 11. This year, 2014, so many years after Christ's birth, might be or have been the hardest that you have gone through in your entire life. But he's right there alongside. We can reflect on this year, not wallowing in self-pity of what has happened, or even to revel in the greatness of what you have accomplished, but to reflect on the love that changes everything. We should be amazed of what Christ has done in us, that we are a part of this great transformation, connected even to those in Hebrews chapter 11. So I know that he's not here, but Pastor Dale and to Life Community, that seeking that you have been doing in this Advent season, keep it up. You never know when God will move in the smallest things, like phone calls or reconnecting with those who you haven't talked to in a long time, or in someone coming to you and saying, I'm sorry. Or being faithful to keep stepping forward into a new place that is honoring the one who came as a little baby.